Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the motion in front of the House today is one of great import, and it deals with the message that Canada is sending to the international community in terms of our official position on human rights in light of the Prime Minister's statement about the death of Fidel Castro. So the motion in front of us reads that in light of the regrettable comments, I would have used a stronger word, but nonetheless I will support this motion, made by the Prime Minister on behalf of Canadians on the death of Fidel Castro, and in an effort to send a clear signal to the Cuban people and the international community that his comments do not reflect the true statements of Canadians. The House, A, reject the comments made by the Prime Minister on November 26, 2016. So I'm going to start with this first component of the motion. My colleagues in the NDP and the Liberals, a couple of their parliamentary secretaries as well, applauded when the suggestion was made that this was a waste of time. I don't think that they understand the gravity of the statement that the Prime Minister made and how embarrassing it was for Canada in terms of our ability to stand up and be honest brokers of human rights policy in the world. Frankly, when I saw this statement come forward, I thought it was a hoax. I couldn't believe that this was actually true. I thought it was on the Onion, Mr. Speaker, or the Beaverton in Canada, I guess. I actually had to double check to make sure that it was true. But you know what? I shouldn't have been surprised. And why? Because the Prime Minister stood up after the international community derided this statement, and it was universal derision except from other brutal dictatorships around the world, which makes me question where his policy allegiances lie, quite frankly. But when he stood up in harsh criticism, under harsh criticism of the statement, he stood up and said, I always stand up for human rights. That is just not true. And why? Because when you stand up for human rights, it has to matter. That statement that he made, the whitewashing of Fidel Castro's record in his country, is an exact opposite of standing up for human rights. And not even a whitewashing of it, a complete celebration of the man as a person, which is embarrassing. Moreover, this Prime Minister has had several chances to stand up for human rights in this place and has not done so. He's not done so. In June of 2015, 2 days before a UN report came out stating what everybody in the world knew, the United States knew it and voted on it, the UK knew, Germany knew it, the Prime Minister had an opportunity to stand up on here and declare the crimes of ISIS against the Yazidi people a genocide. He had the opportunity to stand up for human rights. And what did he do? He sat down. He stayed in his seat. Moreover, this statement here is cementing Canada's lack of backbone on our ability to stand up for what is good and right. And so why is this motion not a waste of time, but something that's so important? This motion is vitally important because we have to give the Canadian people some sort of hope that the people in this place understand what is good and right. And because the Prime Minister did not have the backbone to stand in front of a group of press corps and say, you know what, I got this wrong. This was wrong. I shouldn't have whitewashed a despot's record. We have to have this vote in the House of Commons. Because the world not only laughs at us, the world is raising their eyebrows and going, what role is Canada doing? So that is why every member of this House, especially the Liberal Party, especially those who espouse to stand up for human rights for groups of minorities in Canada, especially those people need to stand up and support this motion because they need to send their Prime Minister a message. They need to say, hey, when I woke up on that morning and I also thought that your statement was wrong and I thought it was a hoax, I'm sending a message to you. And if they don't do that, if the Liberal caucus can't stand up and say, celebrating a brutal dictator's record in a formal statement from the Government of Canada is wrong, then they're doing a disservice to every one of their constituents of every political stripe, and moreover, they are sending a very dangerous message to the international community about what Canada is about. And that is wrong. And that is why this message, this motion is so important here today. I will take no questions or no lessons from this government saying that this is not an important motion. We need to repudiate what he said. Why? Why? Because every single government that we want to have a relationship with and a partnership in standing up for human rights is saying, what did you do? What is this? This is crazy. This is crazy. It's insane. I cannot believe that the Prime Minister of Canada wrote this statement. It's disgusting. It's immoral. It's just so profoundly wrong. And when I've got NDP members, when I've got Green Party members agreeing with this, when there's a unity across party lines in Canada that this statement was an embarrassment and danger, every member in this place should stand up and vote for this motion. They're trying to make it like it's partisan, right? But this is what's right. This motion is what's right, and this is what Canada should stand for. The second component of the motion: recognize the past atrocity and repression borne by the Cuban people under the rule of Fidel Castro, including his long and oppressive regime of imprisoning critics and reported beatings during arrest, restrictions on freedom of expression, associations of assembly, the suffering and restrictions placed on press, minorities, the democratic process, including the LGBT community. So that's partisan, Mr. Speaker. No, that's fact. That is fact. That is what the Prime Minister forgot to mention conveniently in his wonderful celebrative statement of Fidel Castro. It's that component of this motion. So every person in this place is going to have the opportunity to stand up and say, I recognize this happened. And if we don't recognize that something happened when it comes to human rights, if we try to whitewash it or forget it, that's when atrocities happen. That's when we forget who we are and what policies we should be putting forward or who we should be fighting for. I could go on and on. My colleagues have spent a lot of time here today talking about the abysmal isn't a strong enough word, disgusting and inhuman record of Fidel Castro when it comes to human rights in his country. I could talk about imprisoning members of the LGBTI community, the complete lack of free speech, the oppression of his people with just complete, utter, abject failure of their economy. I could go on and on and on. Why is this motion important? Because in this place, we're recognizing that those things happen. We're not turning our back on it or forgetting it as a country that purports to stand up for human rights. So if this Prime Minister wants to say, I always stand up for human rights, then stand up for this motion and admit this happened. The third component of the motion: express its hope and full support for the people of Cuba that they might now be able to see the freedom and a commitment to democracy, human rights, the rule of law in order to ensure a better and brighter and better future for the Cuban people. So I had a parliamentary secretary sat up before here and say, oh, well, why is this, why would we be doing this instead of talking about the future of the Cuban people? This motion is all about the future of the Cuban people. I want them to be ruled under a free democracy, freedom of expression, lack of complete rejection of the things that have been happening under this former military dictator's rule. I want to see the Cuban people free and prosperous. The people that were celebrating on the streets in Florida after he died, they're doing that for a reason, Mr. Speaker. And in Canada, we should be standing up and recognizing it, not issuing a shameful, embarrassing statement that celebrates the rule of a dictator and completely whitewashes his record. Over time and time again, if you hear from groups of people around the world who have suffered genocide, who have suffered human rights atrocities, what will they tell you? They will say, always remember. We must remember. This weekend, we remembered the Holodomor. In this House of Commons, we voted to recognize the Yazidi genocide. Why? Because we must remember. And when the Prime Minister of a G7 country stands up and completely not only forgets to mention an abysmal human rights record and the death of thousands, and then says that this is a waste of time, has his parliamentary secretaries applaud when it's suggested that correcting that grave mistake is a waste of time. It's shameful, it's embarrassing, and I hope every Canadian watches this vote next week and watches the members opposite stand up and not remember. We need to remember what happened there so it doesn't happen again, Mr. Speaker. There are people across the aisles that have worked with me and implored their caucus to stand up for motions around genocide and to stand up, even if it means standing up alone when something is right. This is not a partisan motion. This is what the entire world is thinking. And if this government will not stand up and vote for it, then they stand against the world.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Gatineau.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci à ma collègue pour son discours et l'avant-goût de la rhétorique républicaine surchauffée des 50 dernières années. Elle parle d'épine dorsale. Je vais vous dire c'est quoi de l'épine dorsale. L'épine dorsale, c'est la tradition de premiers ministres libéraux de ce pays qui s'en vont dans des pays comme au Cuba, être solidaires avec le peuple cubain, aller à la télévision, aller dans les universités parler des valeurs canadiennes, parler des droits de la personne, parler du respect pour des communautés gays, lesbiennes, transgenres et j'en passe. C'est ça la tradition canadienne. La tradition canadienne, c'est d'être solidaire et l'histoire nous démontre que l'engagement avec Cuba, l'engagement avec le monde, c'est la bonne voie, c'est la bonne solution à prendre. Ce n'est pas l'ignorance qu'a démontré des gouvernements conservateurs successifs au fil des années. Donc, je demande à ma collègue, peut-être elle veut se rétracter, dans le sens que l'approche libérale, internationaliste, a toujours été démontrée comme étant la bonne. N'est-elle pas d'accord?
Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
Lessons on what a spine means in terms of human rights. That member voted against recognizing the genocide of the Yazidi people. That member is in negotiations with the UN to send our men and women in uniform on peacekeeping missions with no vote in the House of Commons here, while they're pulling out our military assets from the fight to contain ISIL. Over and over again, and you'll listen to his rhetoric, Mr. Speaker, he talked about, oh, Canada talks about these things. I don't want Canada to talk. I want Canada to act. Because when you stand up for something, he talks about standing up for human rights. You stand up with your vote, Mr. Speaker, in this place. And if this member opposite sits down on this, he's also sent a message to the world.